Hey everyone, I'm Madonna and this is David, and I'm so excited that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has just become Health Secretary in America.
Okay.
Boom! I have been waiting for this since August.
You're so excited.
I am so excited because I've been a naturopath kinesiologist for 30 years
Hmm.
and 1 month.
Mhm.
And this is with RFKJ, he's been the first outspoken member of the public who has influence to speak about the things that I love about health.
It's
First time in my
actually
career.
it's
It's really huge.
it's quite incredible actually because just before we got on we were looking up the main points.
Yes.
And when working with naturopathy, it's very interesting to see that a lot of the things that I've noted that natural therapists, because before I was a counsellor, I used to do some marketing and design for naturopaths, and I know, and I've just noticed over the years because I keep that naturopaths have all these difficulties with other health groups, and a lot of the issues that I notice alternative therapists, natural health professionals use, these are the exact things he's addressing.
Yeah.
And,
Which
and
is,
most of the problems that I've seen brought up over and over, they're actually being addressed by what he's organised.
yeah. And what is amazing is that people just see him as a Fruit Loop. But he is like one of the most intelligent human. Like he's
Who
a
says it's
really
why they,
intelligent guy who has the ability to read medical studies. He has the ability to read environmental
he's an
studies.
environmental lawyer, so he's going to be able to.
Yeah, but he's a really, and he avoided the whole jab thing like the plague 20 years ago. He
Yeah.
avoided that because he did not want a bar of it because he was so pro jab. All his kids are jabbed, he's jabbed. There was never a question that he would not get jabbed for everything until someone literally turned up at his house with a big box of stuff and said, I'm not leaving until you read this.
Hmm.
So he didn't let her in the house. But as soon as he started having a look, he thought, right, these mama bears know what they're talking about with their children who
Yeah,
have been
because I
damaged.
remember that, and it was originally actually talking to the mums, and I remember when he
Yeah,
started on that, that was like 15, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
20 years, I
Yeah.
remember that
And he
actually.
he wanted to avoid it like the plague. And I know people really they love their jibbity jabs, and that's fine. But let's have a real discussion about it. So I don't understand the everyone is bad who doesn't believe 100% in. I just got back from a cruise, and one of the ladies on the boat, her mother, her mother's partner, had died 8 days after the AstraZeneca,
Hmm.
and her mother said some people need to be sacrificed for the greater good. That was her answer to her husband dying. And that was, because here in Australia, that's what was pushed on our media every night.
Hmm.
Was really quite it
Well,
was an
Australia,
awful strange time.
even though he's won the selection to be the what is it, health minister in the US?
Yeah, yeah, HHS.
Right. So what's happening in the US isn't happening here yet,
No.
and
No,
um,
but I
and
just
I
hope there's a roll-on
and I
effect.
think that's important to remember because we are still stuck under many of the same attitudes and regulations
Yes.
that the Americans will probably be freed from now.
Yeah.
Which
It's
if
going to be
these,
really interesting watching it because and I know a lot of people hate Trump, but this is really about RFKJ being able to go, right, what are the studies with fluoride? What are the studies with fluoride? Let's have a look at it because I've known for a long, long time, that fluoride can lower IQ. It's not the form we need for our teeth. So people think our teeth are all going to fall apart. It's not, it's an industrial waste product.
hey, I can reduce IQ too. No, it's really true. They found in studies if you use artificial intelligence all the time for your work, what happens is your brain forgets to use
Oh,
those manual
it's like
research
never having to
processes.
remember a phone number these days. How many phone numbers did you know when you were a kid?
Yeah, so a
Like,
lot of the
because you
a lot
had
of
to use your brain.
so a lot of the modern technologies they're reducing people's ability to critical think
Yes, absolutely.
because you can type it up like because we just did that like looking up
The
what
top 10 things that
Robert Kennedy
RFKJ was going to be looking at.
and
So that's what this was here.
and
They
when
were
you
the
and
core
oh
things.
that's right they're in the background and when you look at these things they're like I said, they're things that naturopath deals
Like
with all
he's
the
pro
time because,
nature, for example. You look at RFKJ without a shirt on, he is brown, he's ripped, and he's
right,
70.
yeah, apparently,
He's a guy who believes in the great outdoors.
and he does all his workouts in jeans apparently.
Well, gets good ratings on on his YouTube channel. No, only joking. But but it's all about nature. It's about getting the fluoride out of our water. Not saying that we're going to have unhealthy water. Let's make the water really clean. Absolutely. Because there's a lot of chemicals. He's talking about COVID. Obviously, I read the book, The Real Dr. Fauci.
Well, the difficulty with having unclean water is that everybody drinks water out of plastic bottles.
Yeah.
And
So you're
makes an
getting those.
environmental problem, and we're getting plastic in everything,
Yeah.
which is.
And those microplastics are another reason for people getting dementia and things as well. They know that can cross, everything can cross the blood-brain barrier when we're stressed.
Yeah,
so if we've got a leaky gut, we can have a leaky brain. If we've got a leaky brain, any stress hormones or any toxins in our bloodstream can cross that blood-brain barrier.
because I think it's really interesting. Like when we look at these things, nature, fluoride, chemicals, the COVID vaccine, general health
Jabs.
freedom, the environment, the environmental impact on health, chronic illness, and looking at other ways, and also a focus
He's
on
mentioned natural remedies.
And so really, naturopaths have been dealing with this for a long time, and they've had a lot of opposition.
Huge.
When actually, and now with the focus on metabolic health coming in the mainstream, now these things have almost become like because a lot of the products that were restricted to naturopaths before, you can sort of buy here or there now. Maybe not as good a quality, but they're starting to move into the mainstream way of thinking, because
But there's a lot of dodgy products on the market, so you've really got to know where you're buying and what you're buying, because the amount of things that come through my door where people say I bought 30, 60, 90 of these online, and I'm like, oh man, just use them up, because they're crap. A lot of things are really dodgy. A lot of things are really dodgy.
But it also means that just availability is the thing, because the overall goal is to get everybody's health improved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like each naturopath is only one person who has a very limited ability. You can only deal with so many people a week, for example.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, when it hits in a more of a mainstream traction with metabolic health, because the thing about metabolic health is you're dealing with getting all the hormones and neuroreceptors in your body working right, which is actually the foundation of everything.
Yes.
And then also dealing with toxins, which is also something being overlooked. Because we leave out toxins in our equation when we're looking at health, that means that we leave out parts of medicine that are toxic, right? The overall need to look at, I call it realism, a realistic view of these things without so much focus on the financial incentive, which is the main reason that most people are doing it.
Yeah.
Like we're all trying to work and make a career out of it. So actually having a focus on what's toxic in medicines is important as well.
I on the boat I had like two little things. One lady runs these 3-day detox programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you can guess what I think about that.
Right.
I think they're a scam. So because you can't. That's not the way the body works. You need to be, I believe we need to be detoxing every day of our life in some way. Because, it's sort of like if you get a cheesecloth, white cheesecloth, and you make some dark tea, and then every day you're pouring the dark tea through that. This is what your gut lining's like. So every day you're pouring the dark tea through the cheesecloth, through the cheesecloth, through the cheesecloth, and it gets brown. This is what happens in our intestines, in our blood vessels, in our capillaries. We build up this crap in our bodies that it's almost impossible to get rid of because we're getting more in each and every day.
Well, depending what it's made of, because everybody's diet is not only diet, but we also breathe a lot of things in. We absorb a lot of things through our skin, and
the water supply, the electromagnetic frequencies, the 5G radiation. There's stuff coming in. We're around people, and they've even found that through the homeopathic term is miasm, so the energy around people. Right. So they know. I'll tell you a story about toxins. So up in Canada, where I would imagine, I've been to Canada, the water's just beautiful. But the tap water, however, they were doing a study trying to get some people who had heart issues. So they wanted to see whether probiotics for the gut would actually improve blood pressure on people. So what they wanted to do was get people off their blood pressure medication and then, They wanted people without blood pressure medication for one of the groups, and then people on blood pressure medication for the other group to see where all their metabolic health. Yeah,
trial.
they could not find a single person without blood pressure medication in their bloodstream because the water supply had so much in it.
Oh, really?
These were people who had never been on blood pressure medications. So the water supply, because they're not looking at that. What are they looking at when they're doing the water supply? They're really looking at bacteria.
Well, that's partly because
so
they're recycling all the water now.
Yeah.
They recycle the sewage, and so
yeah. So
how else could it get in there?
No, well,
Come
it's
through
just
the
in the
drain
water supply,
system.
you know, because people pee and poop.
Yeah, yeah.
Ends up in the water supply, ends up in the, as we know, there's no more water on the planet ever going to be. It rains, it goes down in there, it comes through our taps, we
But
drink
there's
it.
more things to that. There's an antibiotic in the water
Oh,
supply
yeah.
too.
Oh, there's millions of things. But that was
Yeah.
just one example that even beta blockers, I think it was beta blockers, they couldn't find anyone without residue in their bodies.
And what about when you buy bottled water? Does that because that's comes from the same place more or less?
Yeah,
They
some
just
bottled
filter
water
it.
is shocking. In fact, on the boat, I was just, bought like a 1.5 litre bottled water so that I didn't have to drink the terrible water. It was so bad.
Really?
I went, I'm not spending that $6.50 again. So I
Mm.
just drank alcohol. No, I had a fun time. Anyway,
But like we need to hydrate ourselves, and we need
Yeah.
a lot of water, and so getting some high quality water.
oh, you've
It,
got to filter your water. That is something that's non-negotiable for me.
even if I'm learning some things like better than nothing is half and half with a lot of things.
Yeah,
So just say you can't do things perfect, you might be able to do half.
yeah,
Like for example, when dieting, say you want a more high fiber diet, maybe you don't want to give up white rice and you don't like brown rice, but if you mix them together,
yeah.
and so you can always do mixes to get you started.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, yeah. Just so that, because the taste buds take 22 times to taste something new for the brain to go, oh, okay, it's not dangerous for me.
Mm.
So when we have an issue with a particular taste, it takes a while to actually shift that in the body.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah, so it's so anyway, I'm really excited because I'm hoping, because we've already got a couple of our politicians here in Australia, Pauline and Malcolm Roberts and people like that. And anyway, so we've got a few politicians who are watching everything going on in the White House at the moment, and they're pushing similar reforms, which won't happen because we're very much.
Yeah, they're like smaller parties.
They're very small parties. We don't really have anyone like RFKJ here in Australia pushing, how amazing is it?
Well, it's actually moved into the mainstream.
Yes.
By this happening, it's actually moved all of this dialogue into the mainstream.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was an underground conversation.
Yes.
Which actually doesn't really benefit many people when it's underground.
Yeah.
Because everything gets called a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
When in fact we're just dealing with realism and what to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
because I do things like bioresonance, like for example with fluoride or environmental toxins or EMFs and 5G, those things all show up in the bioresonance if they're a problem for people. Everything isn't a problem all the time. Our bodies are amazing. Our bodies are amazing at renewing, at adapting, but also, because even with the 5G stuff, the people who have the issues with 5G, we need to upgrade ourselves, because I don't want to not live on the planet, whatever Elon says, I don't want to go to Mars and, the moon.
Somehow we have to.
So we have to upgrade ourselves to be able to cope with
adapt
more.
our resilience.
Yes, exactly. The resilience of our cells, the resilience of our detox organs. I had another lady on the boat who, there's this product, the matured hops bitter extracts, and there's the tiniest amount of preservatives in, like a tenth of the amount that before you even have to put it on the label, and it's too much for her. So, and which is really, she's been in health for like 30 years. And as soon as I heard that, I was thinking about the receptors on cell walls. So every cell in the body has got like 500,000 receptors, and those receptors are for everything, so magnesium and B vitamins and zinc, but as well as things like serotonin and melatonin and your dopamine, all sorts of stuff. So when we're having an issue with something like preservatives, something's gone wrong in the body. And, and she hit me up in the corridor walking somewhere on the boat. And I said, well, have you, because I know one of her good friends, which is Linda, who is really passionate about the broccoli seed extracts, and really good broccoli seed extracts, because they switch on your ability to detox and switch off your pro-inflammatory genetic pathways that, you know, because it's an epigenetic, you know, it helps with epigenetics. The stuff, which is all of this stuff affects our epigenetics. So it's the stuff around the genes that changes the way our genes output to the world. You know, so people say things are genetic, like high blood pressure, but that's not the case, because it's not the case. So that's just what they say, but it's not true. It's
Well,
the
the thing is,
epigenetics. It's the stress that affects your output. It's the environmental toxins that affect the output. It's
right.
your food that affects the output.
Well, however you interpret
It's your
that,
lack of sleep. It's your lack of exercise. Those things all affect the
sure,
output.
sure, but something genetic, like you can see in families that are neurodiverse. They happen.
No, no, that will still be epigenetics.
Well,
It will still be
okay,
epigenetics.
but I don't argue with that.
Yeah.
But because you can easily get caught up in technical point here
I'm just making a
that's not,
point.
yeah. But the thing is
No,
that
because no. People go to the doctor, they get told it's genetic, and that way they're on a drug for the rest of their life.
oh, is that what the problem is?
That's the problem. And
Right.
the problem is that if you've got high blood pressure, for example, and it's genetic. So I go in, oh yeah, my dad had high blood pressure, or my great auntie, third, family member removed, had high blood pressure. So then they go, oh, it's genetic. Here's your blood pressure medication. So then 2 years later, you're getting lots of side effects. So they have that one plus this one, and then you have some other problem. So it's this one plus it. That's the problem. When people believe it's genetic, they don't believe there's
Okay.
another solution.
So with this concept, they say if it's considered genetic, it's turned on and off, right?
Yep.
By some environmental factor.
Yes.
Right. You agree with that. We're on the same page.
98% of genes can be flipped on and flipped off, depending on the environmental factors around it. Yes,
Right.
and they've known that
think
since
but
1965.
sorry, so I listen to a fair bit of science and that's how they explain it.
Yeah,
But there's another thing too. There's also
but that's not genetic. Yeah,
no,
the things that are genetic issues, they can't be changed.
all right, so let's not call it, so in counseling,
Yeah,
you say generational.
yeah,
And whether something's genetic or not, it's happening in multiple generations.
yeah,
Right? So something like ADHD, you can trace into the generations.
yes.
Right? And
But we
so
also know things like
family trauma. And so because
also the toxins.
right,
So
the toxins, yeah,
yeah,
but I'm just saying there's different ways things come down generationally. So with generally they consider with things like you know, averse childhood experiences,
yes,
they come through generationally. And not only that, they find whole suburbs come through generationally. Like when they look, they're like, and it's because of the environmental factors in
yeah,
those generational areas. But then you look at that area, it'll be a lower income area.
yeah,
And so there's all of these things that come through generationally. And if there is what you're saying about genetics, that's only one aspect, right? Whereas actually the demographics important, the way that the families have
yeah,
behaved in
yeah, yeah.
in parenting. Sometimes people are very aggressive in their parenting
Yes.
or very neglectful, and then when you have
What do you
generations
call
from
it?
that,
High octane relationships.
high intensity
High
relationships.
intensity relationships.
That's a
Puts a positive
not
spin on
well,
it.
it's a non-judgmental way of looking at it
Yeah,
because some people are like, because when a lot of couple counsels, a lot of people who fight a lot, they're
yeah,
actually really enthusiastic about getting to the problem.
yeah.
Like in a lot
Oh
of,
no, no, no.
not always, but sometimes a couple will be out,
Yeah,
but then you find that, oh, they've worked that out because that was enthusiasm,
yeah,
right? To get the problem solved.
yeah, yeah. And because I've been doing brain physiology for so long, judgment just isn't on my table. So someone like I had a guy once who he got arrested for punching a cop in the face at a bar fight, basically.
Right.
No, it was a bar fight. And he only came to me because his hand was broken. Have I told you this story before? And he wanted his hand fixed so that he could go and fight some more because fighting was his outlet.
Right.
And his mum. So he was young, and his mum paid for it, and she said, "Oh, I want you to treat his anger, but tell him you're treating the hand."
Right.
So I kept like stacking in the hand, so that I could then go and do some kinesiology on it. I just kept, running the amygdala and working out the emotion underneath the emotion underneath the emotion.
Right.
Anyway, pretty funny.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know why that's funny, but it
but
amused
no,
me.
no, but then from a counseling perspective, like if someone has some anger thing, I mean, there's lots of techniques you can use to work that. I mean,
Yeah.
you can take supplements, you can take drugs,
Yeah.
but there'll still be an underlying thing there to work
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that hasn't been resolved yet.
Yeah.
Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, funny.
Not that I'm, because as a counsellor, you're not judgmental either.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're judgmental, people
We're
won't.
judgmental with each other.
No, had a lot of time.
It's pretty funny, because we generally, well, yeah, it is funny how you're training, really, stay in my lane. So anyway, it's sort of interesting because I do find that, oh no, I was going to say I'm pretty stuck with my thinking, but that's not true. I get new information. I'm quite happy
As a
happy to
therapist,
learn
as
and
soon
grow.
as you're judgmental, the investigation stops.
Yeah, yeah, need to
There's no
stay
more
curious.
curiosity.
Yeah,
And so, it's like, well, because you find it, isn't it, healing over time? It's
yeah,
like, you might do several months and then suddenly this other thing comes up
yeah,
that, like, especially in some things, people won't talk about.
yeah,
Because it's really, you need to feel really safe
yeah.
before you'll talk about some
Mm,
things.
yeah,
And so people are often in counselling, they won't say anything in the beginning because they're scared.
yeah,
They're scared, because there's so many things that we all have that are like very private and very personal and sometimes very strange.
yeah,
And they end up in your life and you go, oh, I don't know how did I end up like that?
yeah, yeah. So anyway,
So good news.
I think it's good news, and because it's going to be very, very interesting moving forward, to see. It's just going to be interesting moving forward because that the rapid, like if we're taking Trump as any example, like imagine how quickly RFKJ can, do stuff because he's like, he's empowered.
Well,
He's empowered.
we haven't really heard what he's going to do yet because
Well,
now he'll
like
be able
3 hours ago,
so
he was
now,
confirmed.
yeah, so because a lot of
So,
stuff was speculative before, and just and what's interesting, this is in the health sector,
yeah.
and
Well, there's been so much gaslighting, obviously, so a lot of people have only heard negative stuff about him. And,
well, there's
whereas I've listened
strong
to many
opposition.
huge, I've read his books, and I've listened to huge podcasts of 3 hours. I've listened to him argue, actually, Alan Dershowitz, I think his name is. He's like a bigwig lawyer, constitutional lawyer from New York. And going back 2 or 3 years ago, they had a big discussion on some forum. And it was really interesting because Alan Dershowitz was one of the ones saying that Americans had no constitutional right to say no to the jibbity jab,
Right.
which was sort of interesting since, from here in Australia, we have no rights. It's interesting. I always thought Americans had more rights than us. So it's sort of
I didn't
interesting.
take it.
Well, no.
I've got some right. Although, I was virtually taken out of society
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
for 3 or 4 years, and I couldn't participate in most things.
yeah. It's been, yeah. I mean, I know everyone suffered the same fate, but it is very interesting now. And lots of the conversations on the boat the last few days were people who have lost people, and it's been an awful
Right.
time.
Well, over time,
Both
noticed.
family members who simply never talk to them again, as well as people who have died. So I
Right.
had lots of those discussions.
Well, hopefully all that stuff can be corrected because it's like I think the lockdown COVID era, it was like something, it was like
Test case.
no, it was like a pimple or something, and now it's burst. And yeah, and now you can look at the whole thing with realism
Yeah,
and see, well, what's the realism here? Because everybody became so polarized
yeah,
with ideas that weren't necessarily completely true.
yeah,
Because when you're on one side of things, it's hard to be objective because no one's listening to the other side. And you see with Robert Kennedy's thing, he only won like 14-13,
yeah,
and so it was like very controversial.
yeah.
Even the American government getting that through, but hopefully now with this, we'll be able to see because it's going into all the
The
areas
only two countries in the world that are allowed to advertise drugs on TV are America and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so therefore, basically, those drug companies can own a television station because of the amount of money that they're putting into a television station.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you a quick story. They have these sneaky little things they do, Big Pharma, going back about 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember how long ago, but we were showed at a conference the advertising that a big pharmaceutical company did in America for 12 months. And it was about some sort of dysphoria, or it was something basically that meant premenstrual tension. But they created this advertising campaign for 12 months to create a need for women, saying, we don't have it yet, we don't have it yet, but wait, we'll get it to your doctor, don't you know? And it created these millions of women who were waiting to get to their doctor, you know, for this pharmaceutical product. And then the second it was released, which was just a reboot of an SSRI or something, you know, it was just something similar to what we've had before, but, you know, and it was, and I remembered one of my clients coming in and saying, I think I've got this, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and she was quite an aware woman. And I remembered saying, that is all just hype in advertising. There's no such thing. We can do it with herbs. You don't need that drug, which has all of these side effects. Boom, 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 boom. So they have these sneaky campaigns to make people think they need. No one on the planet has a pharmaceutical deficiency.
Right.
You know, we've got deficiencies of raw ingredients in our body, and those deficiencies allow disease to take place.
Right. Which are often dietary.
Often dietary.
Or the dietary isn't absorbing properly.
Yeah. Well, you know, the CDC has been studying the Amish for decades.
Right.
So, and the Amish, of course, you know, they're unjabbed, they eat organically, they work hard until they're bloody 150 years old. They have longevity. There's no autism in the Amish community. I think they found 2, but both of them were brought in from the outside. So
most of the young people leaving now.
Well, it doesn't matter.
No, but luckily they got the data before.
Well, they've got this really cool data, and the CDC has never released a report on it because of how damning it would be for the state of health in the world.
Right.
So they know that people who eat organically, who work hard, who, you know, make things from scratch, who wear grey.
Well, it looks
Just
to me
joking.
like in the US that things that were previously not being released, and even when their senators asked for them,
Oh,
they
they've been
refused to give them.
absolutely.
Now
Or things are like 90% redacted.
So there's a thing now where it looks like the books are being opened, and a lot of things like that might become available.
I think they will.
Because when things are being hidden from both the politicians and the people,
Yeah,
that's a bit odd.
well, something that RFKJ did, if you haven't heard about this, the day before Trump was inaugurated, I think, that could be a lie, it was somewhere around then, he released like a 4-hour video on children's health defense, and it was by his chief scientist. That could be a lie, it might be his chief lawyer, but I think chief scientist Brian Hooker. And what he'd asked 20 lawyers or scientists or someone to do over the last 3 years was to go into the PubMed, so PubMed published articles, and basically look
Which
for...
are the American government publishing...
Well, people from around the world can publish.
They're all available.
So, yeah, but yeah, you can go Google everything. But basically, they were looking for hidden studies that were vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Right. And they found a whole bunch of studies.
Did they really?
Yeah. And so they put...
How long ago was that?
Well, the studies. There were a whole bunch of...
How long ago did they find them?
Well, over the last 3 years.
Right.
So basically, this was part of his preparation, I think, you know, to let's get the data out there. So they put together this presentation, which has really definitive numbers. Kids who have had, say, 1 to 3 vaccines in the first year, 4 to 6 vaccines in the first year, 7 to 9 vaccines in the first year, compared to... They didn't find a hell of a lot with no vaccine. So some of them, they were even aware that, you know, there might be a few kids who only had a couple, and then others that had, you know, the gamut of them.
Yeah, because they stop after they have a really bad reaction. Yeah,
but then interesting that... it did not matter what health condition it was worse with vaccines.
Right.
It did not matter, which is, you know, very interesting, you know. So anyway, look out for that. I think it's about 4.5 hours, and it just gives really concrete data. We need to know this stuff. If we don't know this stuff, how can you make a decision when it's... Because everyone says, well, it should be my own choice. And the thing I've always had an issue with that is they don't have the data. They don't have the knowledge. If they're going to a doctor who's being paid $85 for every jibbity jab they're given, that's what it is here in Australia, and that doctor has a huge practice, because a lot of pediatric clinics, that's what they're bulk of their money is based on is vaccines for the kids.
Mm.
So it's, it's a huge, so how do you trust that doctor when they're being paid such huge amounts of money?
Well, I suppose the way I do, I learn a lot about naturopathy. So when I go see the doctor, I'm informed.
Yeah.
And so me personally, I don't have a very negative attitude towards the whole medical thing.
Yeah.
Because basically, I find that by being informed, I have total control over working with my doctors.
Yeah.
And also by being informed and learning a little bit, you also know how to look through side effects and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And I also know that if I do take a drug that has side effects, I know how to taper it.
Yeah.
Because if you just stop taking them, you can have permanent side effects,
Yeah.
that might last for years. Some
Yeah.
drugs are like that, and it's good to look at how to stop them safely. Like one of my son's friends who was 19. He was on some antidepressant. What are they called? And anyway, he was just going to stop taking it. And I said,
Antipsychotic or anti?
yeah, it was one of the main ones. What are the most popular ones? Anyway, and so Xanax or something.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's on it, and he just goes, "Oh, I want to stop taking it." And I'm like, I just said to him, "You should go see the doctor." And he went and saw the doctor again, and then she gave him a thing to taper, but she didn't say that the first time.
Right.
Right, so they weren't recommending tapering, but I brought him in, and then he did, and he didn't have any side effects.
Yeah,
He came off
beautiful.
it smoothly over 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things Trump brought in last time he was in, and again, I know people hate Trump, so sorry, but he brought in the right to try, which was, and I think particularly for people like Vietnam vets, who so much money gets put in there, but their health is shocking. Their health is really bad because there's so many pharmaceuticals involved in the process. So what he gave them was the right to try nutraceuticals.
Right.
So natural remedies, and basically they did start getting, but Biden got in and just wiped all of the right to try, which is sort of interesting what people.
Because I think about that with medicine, even though I disagree with some of it, I still believe in the right to try.
Yeah.
Because some conditions are so painful.
Yeah.
That you'll just do anything.
Yeah.
And also when you get scared about dying, I think it's okay for people to just do whatever their desperation takes them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some people respond to things and other people don't.
Yeah.
Like some drugs, for example, they might be really good for only 5% of people with something.
Yeah.
But they're really good for those people.
Yeah.
Like especially people with really chronic situations like veterans.
Yeah.
I mean they should have more choice than anyone else about.
Absolutely, and that's
because their symptoms are often lifelong.
Yeah.
And even if you can manage them, the symptoms don't go away. I've listened to thousands of interviews with veterans.
Yeah.
And even at the end of their life, they still have all sorts of flashbacks.
Well, one of the things that we have in our clinic, by the way, is the AO Hub. So that helps to regrow neuronal pathways. So they've used it on a lot of Vietnam vets, and it helps with their PTSD because the PTSD is so hardwired in their brain. This helps to open up new pathways so that their brain doesn't go straight to the PTSD as quickly. So, if and I know we're in Brisbane in Australia, but if you're close by and you want to, get in there, give us a call. Yeah. Okay, I think, anyway, I'm just excited. RFKJ, bring it on. Yeah.
That's a good thing. I was really hopeful for that out of all the American stuff. I think that's one of the best things that's happened.
I think so many people have just been saying, he's not going to get in, he's not going to get in.
It's funny, they call this thing Maha, like make America healthy again. In Sanskrit, Maha means great. Ironically.
That is cool. Make Australia healthy again too.
Well, they're lettuce with us, so make America healthy, make Australia healthy. It's still Maha.
It is still Maha. And it is funny here in Australia in the mainstream media, which of course we love and trust, they're all of a sudden doing all of these huge things about fluoride. They're all of a sudden doing all of these big things about the environment, so they're trying to push the propaganda against RFKJ stuff.
Hopefully this stuff can cause a positive shift.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And but there's extreme opposition to it. Like I look in the media and, I'm fairly neutral when I look at things. And I just look at because improving the environment, all of these things improving.
Yeah, how can this be a bad thing?
It can't really be bad for anybody.
And again, I've got nothing against people having jibbity jabs either. But
No.
let's be honest about the numbers. Let's be honest about it. So, because when I did my thesis 31 years ago, there was already problems, and now it's gone from like 6 jabs to 72. So it's massively different now. And of course, he said the other day in Senate, 66% of our kids are damaged.
Right.
Between chronic illness and asthma and ADHD and autism and any of the neurospicy, and not to mention.
That's interesting. I went to school interview for my little boy going into high school the other day, and the lady who heads the special needs, she said something like 46% of the kids were in some special needs thing. And I go, no, and this is Brisbane State High, so it's one of the better schools. And I go, gee, that's high. And she goes, in the suburbs, it goes up to 60 or something.
Wow, that's amazing.
With special needs. So it's like there's that. And that's there to help people, so that's a good thing. But I just said to her about the numbers. I go, gee, they're big numbers. And she goes,
and RFKJ is the first person who hopefully, because we're willing to spend money here in Australia. I don't give a toss if our government tries to support these kids. That's awesome, because we've got these little damaged kids.
And it is really good.
But what they're not doing is looking at the cause. They don't want to look at the cause, and that's what RFKJ is going to do. He wants to know why. And he's not all blaming it on the jabs. He's blaming it on bloody everything. Let's look at the diet. Let's look at the additives. Let's look at the preservatives. Let's look at the glyphosate. Let's look at the toxins in the environment.
Because I've been working with natural therapists for so many years, I remember that was the original thing about the difference between, I remember way back in the old days, it was like the reason that natural therapies had an advantage was that it looked at the cause and not just the symptoms.
Yeah.
Which is, and in counselling, the same thing. It was like they were looking at the symptoms, but then when they did the ACE scores, the adverse childhood experience, they realised that the causes were in childhood for diseases that happened in your late 50s.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And if you haven't seen it, there's a podcast or a TED Talk called Hijacked by a Cupcake.
Right.
And it's about Pamela. So it's Dr. Pamela Peeke, Pweke, and she talks about methylation and how messed up she talks about the adverse childhood events and how that messes up the methylation within the liver.
Oh, really?
Which means you can't metabolize toxins.
Right.
So that's your B6, B9, B12, your activated versions of B6, B9, B12. That helps to stimulate those, those pathways in the liver.
Would NRC help with that too?
Probably, but
not
specifically, because methylation is about methylated B vitamins. Mm-hmm. So if you think of it like that, NAT can help with all sorts of things.
Methylation means it absorbs directly.
It's supporting one of the detox pathways. Yeah, so when they're methylated Bs, they don't need to be converted.
Right.
They're like.
Same as when you get, what's that vitamin C, liposomal?
Liposomal. Yeah. You can get liposomal, vitamin C, and glutathione, and all sorts of things.
Which means it doesn't have to break down. It can.
Yeah, and same with a lot of the Solex products are already nano-sized, so they can cross any membrane in the body. The redox signaling molecules from ASEA can cross the membranes. They don't need the lock and, because there's a mechanism on cell membranes.
Yeah, that's right.
There's sort of like this lock and key thing.
It's so methylation gets through those sort of barriers.
Yeah, well, it stimulates. Well,
yeah. Biochemistry.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a pretty funny TED Talk. That's all. So Hijacked by a Cupcake. Mm-hmm. So, but it's definitely talking about because they had these agouti. Have you heard the agouti mice thing? Mm. So there's this particular type of mice that they grow for lab testing, and they're called agouti. Agouti, that's right. So they're as close to human as you can be in a mouse. And basically they had these little mice genetically predisposed to being big, fat, unhealthy mice. Mm-hmm. So, you could, and they would feed them all sorts of things, and these little mice would go suck it up. And then one day they accidentally fed a whole generation of, I can't remember what happened, but basically they fed, as 10 years since I heard this story, but they fed a whole generation of mice, they don't live a long time, so greens and nothing else. And the next generation of mice from that agouti mice, so in greens, there's a lot of methylation that it supports. And the next round of mice were lean, mean, brown mice, totally different from, so again, genetics, because they would have said they had genetically modified that mouse to be a big, fat, unhealthy mice, one generation, and it changed to be lean, mean fighting machines.
Right.
So again, it's not genetic if you can change it with food. That's epigenetics.
Oh, change with food.
Yeah, bloody oath. Absolutely. Well, what do we think Brock shots is doing? So Brock shots are, they're the broccoli seed extracts as well as some sprouts, but the combination of them have to have one of these key ingredients in, otherwise it doesn't work. But that flips on 200 genes
For me,
that are
I
anti-inflammatory and
wish they'd stop
pro-detoxing.
hurting all the little mice, but
Everyone wishes that.
oh, do
Everyone
they?
wishes that. Yeah.
Well, all right. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
there's so many animal, especially mice experiments in
no, and all
psychology
the
too.
horrible experiments Fauci
A
was
lot of the
involved in, but anyway.
but a lot of the behavioral work was done by Skinner with mice,
Right.
and it's pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah. No, no, that's awful. Yeah. I think everyone agrees that we shouldn't torture animals.
Well, they taught you human then animal, and a lot of the stuff with mice was teaching how to manipulate them
Yeah.
into doing what you want.
Yeah, well, I think did I see that Elon's got a chip in a mice head that's, doing, remote control stuff going around a maze? Did
Oh,
I see something
no,
like that in the last few
horrible.
days? Anyway, I don't want a brain chip. I refuse to have a brain chip. Anyway,
He's a bit of an interesting guy.
he's, yes, wild card. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's doing some fun stuff. I'm just,
Well,
anyway,
at least it's entertaining now.
it's very
Like
entertaining.
if you were bored before, you're not now.
Anywho, I think that
Everyone's excited everywhere, whether if they like it or not, they're excited.
well, it's creating some, yeah, well, some people are just really angry.
Well, hopefully it'll all work out, and hopefully,
Wouldn't it be interesting if everyone's health just improved despite them?
right.
If the fluoride got taken out of the water, if
No,
the vegetable oils
I
get taken out of the kids' school lunches, if the glyphosate gets taken off the wheat in the school lunches, and all of a sudden these kids, their brains start working better because they're less inflamed because there's less crap in the schools. I remember when Michelle Obama, she was involved in the whole school lunches thing and pushing lots of vegetables. But what she did, they took so much, because they take money from different industries. And basically they changed the rule when she was, well, she was in, so that a piece of pizza was a serve of vegetable.
right.
So if you had 4 pieces of pizza, that was 4 serves of vegetable for the day. Like, what a joke.
The thing is, for me about the Americans is that it's so, with all this stuff, I got a bit of thing because when Obama got voted in, he was making these beautiful speeches about yes, we can,
Yeah.
and then they didn't.
Yeah.
And so with this,
I was so excited. And from
a
a natural perspective, he did all sorts of things that were really bad for natural therapies. He stopped all funding
right,
to find out whether genetically modified foods were bad for people,
right,
and pushed huge amount of money out into agriculture for
right.
people.
And so, this
there
is
was
where
some
I
really
get
negative
this
stuff.
is where I get a bit, I'm like, I'm not cynical, but I'm a bit like, okay, so
let's just see what happens
so we
with
got the
RFKJ.
and we'll see what happens because
Yeah.
we don't know, and people can get sabotaged, and
Yeah.
all types of things can happen. So I really enjoy the hype bit, and it's really exciting.
It feels exciting.
And like John Kennedy said, he's a Democrat guy, so it's not partisan. He goes, well, it's nice to have a
real president
real
again.
something like that.
Oh, that is fun.
No, he said it's nice to have a president again, which was just so bizarre thing to say.
Biden did spend a lot of time in the basement.
Right, but I think he might have been talking for a few generations.
Yeah, right. Anyway, it's a bit of fun.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Anyway, up to natural health.
Woo!